He laughed during our divorce hearing until the judge read my financial statement out loud. He thought I was broke, but my empire proved him wrong. The courtroom was colder than I expected, and my soon-to-be ex-husband Michael was already smirking across the table. He leaned back in his chair, whispering something to his lawyer that made him laugh out loud, as if this entire divorce hearing were a comedy show put on just for him. My hands tightened around the stack of papers I carried, the ones I had prepared meticulously for this day. To him, I was still the naive small-town girl who had followed him blindly into a life he thought he controlled. He believed I had no backbone, no money, no independence. He thought I was walking away with nothing but the clothes on my back. And maybe, just maybe, that's why his laugh was so loud when the judge asked if there were any objections before reading the financial statement. I didn't flinch. I had practiced my calm expression in the mirror 100 times. The truth was, while he spent years wasting money on image, status, and late-night business meetings, I had been building something of my own. Quietly, steadily, without him ever noticing. My lawyer gave me the smallest nod, and in that moment I knew everything was about to shift. Michael's smug confidence wouldn't last another 10 seconds. Would he finally realize who I had become when the judge began to read the numbers out loud? The judge's voice carried across the courtroom, sharp and formal. According to the financial disclosure submitted by Mrs. Shannon, I could see Michael still grinning, twirling his pen between his fingers like he was bored. He hadn't even bothered to glance at the folder on the table in front of him, too confident that my accounts would show next to nothing. I leaned back, pretending to adjust my blazer, but inside, my chest was pounding. Years of being dismissed as the small-town wife were about to unravel in front of everyone. The statement began with my savings accounts, modest at first, nothing surprising. Michael barely raised his eyes. Then came the business income, line after line of consistent deposits. His pen froze mid-spin. The judge kept reading. Mrs. Shannon is the sole owner of Westbrook Financial Consulting LLC, valued at. The number that followed was large enough to make Michael's smirk collapse in real time. He blinked, leaned forward, and for the first time that day, actually paid attention. I watched the color drain from his face, and it was more satisfying than I had ever imagined. He had thought he controlled everything, every cent, every decision, even me. But now, with a single statement, the balance of power shifted entirely. And that was only the beginning. Michael's head snapped toward me, his mouth half open, like he wanted to object but couldn't find the words. I kept my eyes forward, focused on the judge, though every muscle in my body screamed with the urge to look at him, to savor his shock. Estimated annual revenue of Mrs. Shannon's firm exceeds $1.2 million, the judge continued. The courtroom went so quiet I could hear the scratch of the clerk's pen on paper. My lawyer folded her hands neatly, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. She had known all along that Michael would underestimate me. Finally, he leaned toward me, his voice a low hiss. "What the hell is this, Sarah?" For years, I had dreamed of that question. I turned my head slowly, met his panicked eyes, and whispered just loud enough for him to hear. "It's called working hard while you were too busy playing rich." The truth was, I had started the business with nothing more than a laptop, late nights, and a belief that I deserved better than being someone's accessory. Now, my empire stood taller than his fragile ego ever had. But the sweetest part wasn't the money. It was the realization dawning on his face. He had lost control of me forever. The judge cleared his throat and continued, unbothered by the silent war unfolding between us. Additionally, Mrs. Shannon holds diversified investments in real estate, equities, and mutual funds totaling. Another staggering figure echoed in the room. I heard a sharp gasp, this time not from Michael, but from his mother sitting 2 rows behind him. Margaret Shannon had always made it clear I wasn't good enough for her son. At every dinner, every holiday, every charity gala, she reminded me with subtle barbs that I was from the wrong background. And now, as the judge listed my properties, 3 rental homes, a condo in Nashville, even a small vacation cabin I'd bought in cash, her face drained of its usual superiority. Michael's lawyer leaned in, flipping frantically through the papers as if searching for a loophole. But there wasn't one. My financial statement was airtight, every line documented, every number precise. Years of late nights, double-checking ledgers, and reinvesting profits had brought me here. Finally, Michael spoke louder this time, his voice cracking. She hid this from me. The judge paused, peering over his glasses. Mr. Shannon, your wife was under no obligation to inform you how she managed her independent earnings. In fact, it appears she disclosed more than required. I let that sink in. He had laughed at me only minutes ago. Now the entire courtroom was watching him unravel, piece by piece. And the most delicious part? I hadn't even revealed everything yet. Michael's jaw clenched so hard, I thought his teeth might crack. His lawyer whispered something frantically, but his eyes never left me. That smug confidence he had carried into the room was gone, replaced by disbelief and the tiniest flicker of fear. The judge kept reading. Furthermore, Mrs. Shannon's consulting firm has recently secured contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies, ensuring continued projected growth for the next 5 years. That was the moment his composure shattered. He slammed his palm on the table. This is insane. She was nothing when I met her. I finally turned my head and looked at him, calm and steady. You're right, Michael. I was nothing until I stopped believing that's all I could ever be. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even the court reporter raised her eyes for a split second, as if she too was savoring the irony. Michael's mother buried her face in her hands, and I caught a glimpse of her shaking her head. All those years she treated me like a charity case, and now she was realizing her precious son was about to lose everything he thought he controlled. But what he didn't know, what no one in that room knew yet, was that I had one more surprise waiting. A detail in my statement that would not only wipe that last trace of arrogance from his face, but change the course of this divorce entirely. The judge's tone shifted slightly, as if even he was impressed. In addition, Mrs. Shannon has placed all business shares into a trust under her sole control. This ensures her assets remain separate from any marital division. Michael's head snapped up. A trust? What trust? I allowed myself the smallest smile. Years ago, while he was busy bragging at law firm parties, I was sitting in quiet meetings with financial advisors. I learned how to structure my company, how to protect it from predators, including him. The courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on us. Michael's lawyer whispered urgently, flipping page after page, but I knew he wouldn't find a single crack. I had worked too hard for that. Mr. Shannon, the judge said firmly, it appears your wife has acted with full transparency and foresight. Her assets are separate. Your petition for equitable division of her business is denied. Michael went pale. That denial was his worst nightmare. Without my firm, he had nothing to bargain with, no leverage, no control. He had entered this hearing ready to humiliate me. Now he was the one stripped bare, exposed in front of everyone. I crossed my legs calmly and folded my hands. Don't look so shocked, Michael, I whispered just loud enough for him to hear. You always told me to know my worth. I finally listened. But even as he sat there, humiliated, I knew the biggest blow was still to come. Would he survive it when he realized how deep I had truly planned for this day? Michael's voice rose, desperate now. She can't just walk away with everything. I supported her. I paid for everything while she played around with spreadsheets. The judge frowned at the outburst, but I didn't flinch. Correction, I said evenly. You paid for dinners and vacations. I built my business with my own contracts, my own clients, and my own sleepless nights. There's a difference. The judge nodded slightly, confirming my words as he continued. Mrs. Shannon's earnings and assets have been independently verified. Furthermore, her tax records indicate consistent growth and compliance for the last 5 years. The papers rustled as the clerk organized the evidence. Michael's lawyer looked defeated, rubbing his temple like he already knew the case was lost. Michael, on the other hand, stared at me as if he'd never seen me before. You planned this, he muttered, his voice low and trembling with rage. I met his gaze without hesitation. No, Michael. I survived this. There's a difference. For years, I'd lived in his shadow, nodding politely at his friends' jokes, pretending his arrogance was confidence, biting my tongue when he belittled me in front of his family. Every insult, every dismissal, it had all led to this moment. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, the judge turned another page. Lastly, Mrs. Shannon's charitable foundation. I saw Michael's eyes widen again. He didn't even know about that. And that was exactly the point. The judge cleared his throat and read slowly, almost with emphasis, the Shannon Foundation for Women in Finance, fully funded and solely managed by Mrs. Shannon, holds assets totaling. He paused, then announced the number. Gasps filled the courtroom. Michael's face went red, then white. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He had mocked me for years, calling my job cute bookkeeping. Now he was realizing I had built something not only powerful, but untouchable. I let the silence linger before speaking. That foundation helps girls like I once was, told they weren't enough, laughed at for dreaming too big. I made sure no one else would ever feel that small. The judge nodded approvingly, and for once, I felt the weight of validation, not from him, not from Michael, but from myself. Michael slammed his fist against the table again, this time with a trembling hand. "This is humiliating," he hissed. I tilted my head, studying him. "That's funny. I spent 6 years being humiliated while you cheated and laughed at me. Consider it balance." A murmur of agreement rippled through the courtroom benches. Even strangers could see it. The tables had turned completely. But inside me, it wasn't just victory. It was freedom. The shackles of his control had finally shattered. And yet, as satisfying as this was, I knew one last revelation would leave him utterly destroyed. Michael leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table, so tightly his knuckles turned white. "She's lying," he spat. "She can't have done all this without me knowing." The judge raised an eyebrow. "The documentation speaks for itself, Mr. Shannon. Unless you can provide evidence to the contrary, the court recognizes her filings as accurate." His lawyer gave a tiny shake of the head, confirmation that there was no evidence. Michael had been too busy flaunting his status, too sure of his own importance, to notice what I was really doing with my time. I finally turned to him fully, my voice calm, steady, almost soft. "You never saw me, Michael. You saw a girl you could mold, someone who'd make you look good. But while you were busy laughing at me, I was building a life without you in it." His jaw tightened, but his eyes betrayed the truth, fear, and something darker. The realization that he hadn't just lost his marriage. He'd lost the game he thought he controlled. The judge's gavel tapped lightly, signaling the end of the reading. The financial statement stands. Division will proceed according to these findings. Michael slumped back in his chair, defeated. For the first time in years, he was silent. But I wasn't done. I still had one last card to play, one final truth that would make sure he never underestimated me again. I rose slowly, my heels clicking against the courtroom floor as I handed my lawyer a sealed envelope. She slid it across to the judge without a word. Michael's eyes followed it like prey sensing a trap. The judge opened it, scanning the contents before speaking. "This final disclosure includes documentation of Mrs. Shannon's recent purchase of the Belmead residence, previously considered marital property. Deed and mortgage records confirm it is now solely in her name, acquired independently." Michael shot upright. "What? That's my house." I finally let myself smile, calm and deliberate. "Correction, it was. I bought out the mortgage after you defaulted on payments. You didn't think I noticed. While you were spending money on dinners with your co-worker, I secured the home legally in my name." Gasps filled the room again. Even the bailiff glanced up from his post. Michael looked around wildly, as though someone might come to rescue him. But no one moved. His lawyer buried his face in his hands. "You laughed at me today," I said quietly, my voice carrying in the stillness. "But the truth is, you've been laughing at me for years. This is where it ends." The judge's gavel struck, final and firm. Divorce granted. Assets awarded as filed. Michael sat down heavily, his face drained of every ounce of arrogance. I walked out of that courtroom taller than I had ever stood before. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't someone's shadow. I was free, wealthy, independent, and finally seen. And as the doors closed behind me, I didn't hear laughter anymore. Only silence,